Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 91. What goes around comes around. Fire globe after fire globe descended onto the corpses. The reek of blood still filled the air, but it was soon overpowered by the stench of scorched flesh. The disgusting odor emanated out in all directions. Meng Hao collected the bags of holding. He sniffed the air, then with one last silent look at the North Sea, turned and left. I can't stay in the state of Jiao anymore. I need to leave. Meng Hao knew that if the winding stream sect had appeared, then the rest of the three great sects must also be aware of the deaths of their priests and elders. Soon, the mountains would be crawling with qi condensation cultivators seeking to determine how they had died. Meng Hao frowned. Looking off into the distance, an image appeared in his mind, a map of the southern domain. On the other side of these mountains was a vast plain which was the border of the state of Jiao. It's not far, but things will get violent here very soon. I can't stay any longer. Meng Hao changed his direction. These mountains belonged to the region of the Reliance sect. He would leave the state of Jiao by a different route. With his mind made up, Meng Hao raced forward. Unfortunately, before he could get far, his eyes narrowed, and he dropped to the ground. Frowning, he looked off into the distance with cold eyes. A few dozen kilometers ahead of him, an enormous glowing shield was descending from the sky. It transformed into countless flakes of flying snow which cut off the Reliance sect outer reaches from the rest of the world. Floating in the sky off in the distance was a middle-aged man wearing a long black robe. His cultivation base was at the foundation establishment stage. In his hand he held a piece of frozen jade. Beams of light twirled around it slowly. This magical item was the source of the flying snow shield that surrounded everything, sealing it off. Surrounding the man were 7 or 8 qi condensation cultivators, with dignified looks on their faces. From their clothing, Meng Hao could tell that they were from the Cold Wind sect. No wonder they're called the Three Great Sects. Even with so many foundation establishment elders dead, even more appear. Meng Hao's heart sank as he realized that this seal had completely cut off his path of escape. He had no way to leave now. Before he had time to examine the situation further, he suddenly shot backward. The flying snow shield had suddenly begun to contract rapidly. As it did, it completely froze the land and trees it passed. It moved rapidly, heading directly toward Meng Hao's position. Of course, it wasn't targeting Meng Hao. This was just a normal function of the sealing spell. The contraction wouldn't last for long. It would move inward a few hundred kilometers, then slowly come to a stop. Meng Hao was not very far away from it. As he retreated, he had no time to conceal his movements. As it approached, he hopped onto a flying sword, transforming into a beam of light, which of course attracted the attention of the Cold Wind sect cultivators. That person. It's Meng Hao. I saw his picture. So, it's Meng Hao. The priests and the others are looking for him. Seize him. Then we can finally understand what happened here. The eyes of the Cold Wind sect cultivators glowed with ill intentions. All of you, go capture him, said the Foundation Establishment cultivator. I'm consolidating the sealing spell and still need few moments. Having just activated the seal contraction, he wasn't able to leave his position. However, as far as he was concerned, Meng Hao was incapable of escape. As soon as the words left the man's mouth, the 7 or 8 Cold Wind disciples shot after Meng Hao in pursuit. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. He shot forward, the seal contracting behind him, the cultivators right behind it, hot in pursuit. As he raced forward, the Cold Wind shield grew closer and closer, until it was only about 30 meters away. Finally, it slowed down and stopped contracting. It became a thick shield of ice, covering the entire Reliance sect mountainous regions. The seal was actually not completely solidified. If he was only at the 9th level of qi condensation, he would not have been able to tell. But he was of the great circle of qi condensation. Looking at the seal, He could tell that it would not last for very long. I can't get out, and I can't kill my way out. I need to get over the mountains as fast as possible. Looking at this seal, I can tell it will start to loosen up soon. Once it does, I can make my escape. Meng Hao gritted his teeth. He knew that this plan was a bit of a stretch, but he didn't have many other options. Finding a way to conceal himself for a bit of time would do, but first he had to take the initiative to get out of his current situation. Eyes gleaming, he ceased his retreat. Instead, he stood there, watching coldly as 8 Cold Wind sect cultivators approached. 8 people in all. 2 of the 9th level of Qi condensation, 4 of the 8th and 2 of the 7th. They all have magical flight items. It seems the 3 sects are quite anxious. They didn't spare any cost at all to get here as quickly as possible. Meng Hao glanced back at the Foundation Establishment cultivator. He was maintaining the spell and couldn't move at the moment. However, as a Foundation Establishment cultivator, he was extremely powerful. He floated there, looking coldly at Meng Hao. As their gazes locked onto each other, the 8 other cultivators shot through the flying snow shield. This was one of the strange properties of this particular shield. It could be entered into, but not exited. The 8 people descended onto Meng Hao, their faces twisted with vicious grins. He sprang into action. He clenched his right hand into a fist, stepped forward, and smashed it into the ground. The power of the great circle of Qi condensation exploded out as a gale force wind slammed into the 8 cultivators. They stopped in their tracks, shock written on their faces. At the same time, 2 wooden swords appeared in Meng Hao's hands. They screamed through the air, and the heads of the 2 7th-level Qi condensation disciples flew into the air. "One breath," said Meng Hao to himself. The Foundation Establishment cultivator had said he only needed a few moments. Meng Hao wasn't sure if that was true or not. Either way, his own requirement was that he wipe out these 8 people within the space of 10 breaths. Amidst the whistling screams of the wooden swords, the remaining 6 disciples scrambled to pull out magical items. Before that could happen, Meng Hao spun, dashing toward one of the 8th-level cultivators. He didn't use a magical item, but rather his shoulder. Boom! Meng Hao slammed into him, and blood shot out of his mouth. His body caved in, and as he flew backward, Meng Hao flicked his right hand. A massive flame python appeared, 60 meters long. Roaring, it shot toward another 8th-level cultivator. A blood-curdling scream rang out as the flame python consuming him whole. 4 breaths. In 4 breaths, Meng Hao had killed 4 people. The remaining 4 looked on in shock. Meng Hao had attacked with a viciousness they had never before seen. Now that he had revealed the power of his cultivation base, the remaining 4 cultivators trembled, unable to comprehend what was happening. Off in the distance, the Foundation Establishment cultivator looked on in shock. Moments ago, he had seen that Meng Hao was at the 9th level of Qi condensation, but in the space of a few breaths, his cultivation base had suddenly climbed to an incredible height. 6 breaths. Meng Hao's hand flickered in an incantation, and the sword auras from the 2 wooden swords spilled out. The remaining 2 cultivators of the 8th level of Qi condensation tried to defend with magical items as the swords shot forward. Horrified screams rang out as their hearts were stabbed through. Their bodies fell to the ground. Now, only 2 cultivators remained, both of the 9th level of Qi condensation. Their faces pale, they had already begun to edge backwards. When Meng Hao's cold gaze fell upon them, they scattered, each one running off in a different direction. With a cold look on his face, Meng Hao raised his right hand, which flickered with an incantation. A massive wind blade appeared, 15 or 20 meters long. It sped forth with a shrill whistling sound. At the same time, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding. The black bow appeared in his hand. He drew back on the bow, and then shot an arrow toward the other person. 8 breaths, said Meng Hao softly. 2 booming sounds rang out. The wind blade slashed through the first 9th level cultivator, splitting his body in 2 and sending blood and gore splattering everywhere. Simultaneously, a black arrow pierced the other cultivator's head, causing it to explode violently. 8 breaths, 8 kills. Meng Hao, expressionless, looked out through the flying snow shield at the Foundation Establishment cultivator for a moment. Then his body transformed into a glittering beam and he shot off into the distance. He moved about, avoiding quite a few cultivators. But the area covered by the sealing spell was not large. With so many cultivators of the 8th and 9th levels of chi condensation, it wouldn't take them long to search everywhere. As for Foundation Establishment cultivators, they could fly, and would be able to search even faster. Meng Hao continued to evade detection, until finally he approached the Reliance sect itself. It was then that 10 beams of light appeared in the sky, soaring forward at top speed. In the lead of this group of people was a grim-faced old man. Unlike the others who surrounded him, he was not soaring, but actually flying. Cultivators of the chi condensation stage could not do this. This man was clearly a Foundation Establishment cultivator. The Upright Evening sect. Catching sight of them, Meng Hao sighed. He finally came to accept that he would not be able to escape this day. He could try to hide, but he would be found eventually. Meng Hao. Upon catching sight of him, the faces of the Upright Evening sect cultivators twisted. The old man of the Foundation Establishment stage raced toward Meng Hao, his eyes shining. Meng Hao's eyes grew dark as he watched the Foundation Establishment cultivator approach. The massive power of the Foundation Establishment stage roiled out from the man. The immensity of this power caused the surrounding chi condensation cultivators to shrink back, their cultivation bases teetering. This was the might of Foundation Establishment. He flew through the air with seemingly no effort, imposing to the extreme. Without even trying, he caused the chi condensation cultivators to tremble. But Meng Hao was not an ordinary chi condensation cultivator. A 13th level cultivator of the Great Circle of Chi Condensation had not been seen since ancient times. He had spiritual sense. Although it wasn't very strong, it was there. His cultivation base was not thrown into chaos like the others. His physical body was more powerful, his chi vessels tougher, even his bones were stronger. Despite facing up against a powerful Foundation Establishment expert, he refused to retreat back even half a pace. So, the person who created all these waves in the state of Jiao is a cultivator halfway to the Foundation Establishment stage, said the Foundation Establishment cultivator coolly. Today, however, if I say you shall die, then die you shall. Just then, another beam of radiant light appeared from behind Meng Hao. It screamed toward them. This was none other than the Cold Wind Sect's Foundation Establishment expert. He radiated a killing aura. I tread the path of cultivation, and am not ignorant of the rules of life and death, said Meng Hao coolly. I can kill others, so naturally, others can kill me. But let me ask you a question. You 3 sects permitted Xianxia to absorb the life force of the mortals of 3 counties. He even damaged their longevity. Mortals do not practice cultivation. Harming a cultivator is one thing, but you, for selfish personal gain, permitted such a horrific act. This is a violation of the theory of law. What goes around comes around. He had wanted to say these words for a long time. Theory of law? In heaven and earth, the powerful people make the laws. And if what goes around comes around, then you've got something coming to you, wouldn't you say? Meng Hao said nothing. He simply looked up into the sky. This chapter was sponsored by Robert Moran. Chapter 92. Exterminate Foundation Establishment. In front of Meng Hao was the old Foundation Establishment cultivator from the Upright Evening sect. Behind him was the enraged Foundation Establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect. As of this moment, Foundation Establishment cultivators from 2 of the 3 great sects of the state of Jiao had appeared. In his heart, Meng Hao knew that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. It would be difficult to escape. Theoretically, he could lead them into Patriarch Reliance's secluded meditation zone, but to do that would require the cooperation of Patriarch Reliance himself. Considering everything that had happened between the 2 of them, and also considering the Patriarch's temperament, it was doubtful he would help out. Furthermore, Meng Hao had already used that ruse that once. The chances of tricking more people in the same way was not high. In the end, though, he had little choice but to try. "The priests and elders of the three great sects are not dead," he said suddenly, just as the Foundation establishment cultivator from the Upright Evening sect approached with hand raised. As soon as the words left his mouth, the old man's eyes gleamed. The face of the man from the Cold Wind sect also flickered. "They're trapped inside Patriarch Reliance's Immortal's Cave. It's right over there." He lifted his hand to point at the East Mountain. The eyes of the Foundation establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect flashed like lightning as he glanced up at the peak. The group of Chi condensation cultivators from the Upright Evening sect also looked toward the East Mountain. However, the Upright Evening sect Foundation establishment cultivator smiled. It was a gruesome smile filled with ridicule. "I'm interested to know how you are aware that the priests and elders from the three great sects are dead." Hearing this, Meng Hao's heart flip-flopped, although his expression did not change. "It actually doesn't matter what you say. Once I get a hold of you, you'll answer all my questions." He lifted his right hand and stretched it out towards Meng Hao. As he did, the power of his Foundation establishment cultivation base exploded out, and an enormous hand appeared in the air in front of him. It screamed through the air, heading directly toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao immediately began to dodge, but even as he did so, the Foundation establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect flicked his sleeve and gave out a cold laugh. A fierce wind shot toward Meng Hao. Both Foundation establishment cultivators attacked at the same time. Gritting his teeth, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding. A sheet of lightning appeared which coalesced into a lightning flag. This flag was one of the objects he had taken from Patriarch Reliance, and it had the power to defend against attacks from Foundation establishment cultivators. As soon as it appeared, it grew, transforming into a sheet of mist, within which lightning roiled. The mist expanded out to cover Meng Hao. An explosion rolled out. Inside the mist, Meng Hao coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his body was shoved backward. The eyes of the old Foundation establishment cultivator grew wide, and he stared in shock at the mist. The man from the Cold Wind sect gasped loudly. The mist surrounding Meng Hao was about 15 or 20 meters in diameter. Meng Hao's face was pale and his mouth was smeared with blood. His internal organs ached and bled, and only by extorting a huge amount of effort was he able to keep them under control. To employ the full power of the flag would require significant refinement, and Meng Hao hadn't had very much time to practice with it. As such, he could only utilize half of its power. It rotated around him unstably. "This is an excellent treasure," said the old man from the Upright Evening sect. "Too bad you can't use it correctly. Let's see how much of my magic you can withstand." He moved forward, raising his hand again. A field of black dust spread out in front of him. It glittered as it transformed into a multitude of black threads, which then flew toward the mist. A boom rang out, and then the old man himself neared the mist. Every time he waved his hand back and forth, the black dust threads smashed into the mist, causing booms to ring out. With a cold smile, the Cold Wind sect cultivator flashed an incantation sign. His hand instantly transformed into ice, which then shattered and reformed in front of him into a larger hand. The icy hand shot toward Meng Hao. In the blink of an eye, it reached him. Thunderous roars filled the air as the black threads and the icy hand caused the mist surrounding Meng Hao to slowly contract. Inside, blood sprayed from Meng Hao's mouth, and his body felt as if it were about to be torn to pieces. His mind was in a jumble, and his face as pale as death. A feeling of life and death peril enveloped him. The thread connecting him to the lightning flag could be severed at any moment. When that happened, it wouldn't matter that Meng Hao's cultivation base had completed the great circle of Qi condensation. That was still the Qi condensation stage, and he was facing the Foundation establishment stage. The gap between the two was too vast. At this critical juncture, Meng Hao, his eyes bloodshot, suddenly slapped his bag of holding. In his hand appeared an oil lamp, from within which emitted an ancient Qi. The wick of this lamp was a nascent soul, sitting cross-legged in meditation. It was none other than Lord Revelation. The nascent soul was the fuel, and life force was the fire. The blazing flame cast light onto Meng Hao's face. A ferocious expression filled his face, and his eyes shined with killing intent. He had thought of the only possible way to get out of this situation. He took a deep breath, and suddenly, popping sounds rang out from his body. His cultivation base began to rotate with the power of the great circle of qi condensation. His core C roiled and churned, and spiritual power raced through his qi passageways. He poured the full power of his cultivation base into a single mouthful of qi. He looked out past the mist. Because the mist was covering him, no one could see the oil lamp in his hand. Furthermore, none of the qi from the lamp emanated outwards. Bangs rang out as the mist continued to contract. Currently, it only stretched out about 3 meters. More black dust appeared in the hand of the old Foundation establishment cultivator. "Open up," he roared, waving his hand toward the mist. Instantly, an explosion could be heard as the mist shattered and dispersed, reforming into the lightning flag, which flew back to Meng Hao. "If I say today is the day you die, then you will die." The old man waved his hand again, and the black dust descended toward Meng Hao. It was then that the old man noticed the oil lamp in the hands of pale-faced Meng Hao. His expression suddenly changed. "Is that Meng Hao's killing intent soared. Without giving his opponent even the chance to think, he opened his lips and spit out the mouthful of qi. The qi passed through the flame of the oil lamp. As it did, it expanded out into a massive conflagration. The old Foundation establishment cultivator retreated, shocked. But the expanding flames were too fast, and reached him in an instant. Miserable screams filled the air as fire consumed him. The black dust in his hand had already been vaporized. Within seconds, his clothing, and then his flesh, had been reduced to ash. Everything happened too quickly. The surrounding cultivators didn't even have time to react. By the time the blood-curdling screams began to ring out, the old cultivator had already been burned into nothingness. Nothing remained, not even his bag of holding. Meng Hao's face was pale, and his hands trembled. The qi he had just shot out contained all the power of his cultivation base, as well as the fearsome might of the oil lamp's flame. Everything was as silent as death. Wisps of twisting demonic flame still floated about in the spot where the Foundation establishment cultivator had been incinerated. The sounds of his screams still echoed in the air. The 9 or so remaining cultivators from the Upright Evening sect looked on with expressions of disbelief. Elder Zhong just. What was that fire? This is impossible. Elder Zhong is a Foundation establishment cultivator. How could he possibly die under Meng Hao's hand? They didn't dare to believe. A mighty Foundation establishment expert, unexpectedly, burned to death by a flame cast by a qi condensation cultivator. In their minds, this was an impossibility. Foundation establishment cultivators simply could not be killed by qi condensation cultivators. Even a weak Foundation establishment cultivator shouldn't be able to die at the hand of a qi condensation cultivator. What they had just witnessed set their minds spinning into chaos. They stared at Meng Hao in astonishment. What they didn't know was that the Foundation establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect was even more flabbergasted than they were. He stared at the place where the old Foundation establishment cultivator had just been, his eyes wide, his face pale, and his heart trembling. An indescribable fear gripped his heart. As a Foundation establishment cultivator, he was in an elite position in the state of Zhao, and rarely had anything to fear. Yet now, he was afraid. In fact, afraid is probably not the appropriate word. He was petrified. He looked at the oil lamp in Meng Hao's hand, his mind reeling. The terror in his heart grew stronger. He didn't know what fire this qi condensation disciple had wielded, but he had an inkling. That must have been nascent soul fire. That's a nascent soul. That fire was kindled with life force to form nascent soul fire. It can burn to death, not only Foundation establishment cultivators, but also core formation stage cultivators. His breathing agitated, he stared at Meng Hao. His scalp grew numb, and he subconsciously retreated a few paces. He did not dare to get any closer. At the moment, he had forgotten completely about his prestigious Foundation establishment status. Meng Hao stood there on his flying sword, the lamp in his hand. He made a beckoning motion with his left hand, and the lightning flag flew back into his bag of holding. He rotated his cultivation base, staring coldly at the Cold Wind sect cultivator. It was at this moment, however, that 3 blurs of light appeared in the air above the Reliance sect, each one over 30 meters wide. Ripples spread out from them as they shot mightily toward Meng Hao and the others. Within the three beams were three old men who looked as if they had just climbed out of the grave. Their faces were covered with wrinkles, and strong death qi emanated from their bodies. And yet, along with the death qi that circled about them was the qi of their condensation bases. This qi was eminently powerful. It was not quite of the nascent soul stage, but they had definitely completed the great circle of core formation. Meng Hao's heart sank, and he clasped his oil lamp tightly. He had just expended roughly 80 to 90% of his cultivation base. It had taken that much to create the terrifying fire he had just utilized. Their speed was incredible as they approached. A relieved expression appeared in the eye of the Foundation Establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect. And yet, at that very moment, a qi appeared which surpassed that of the pseudo-nascent soul stage patriarchs. In an instant, the qi enveloped the entire state of Jiao. An enormous bell appeared above the Reliance sect, and a grim voice filled the air. Patriarch Reliance, get the hell out and face me. The voice crackled like lightning, its power filling the sky. Its might billowed out, shattering the flying snow shield. As for the 9 or so qi condensation disciples from the Upright Evening sect, blood fountained out of their mouths, and then one by one, they exploded, unable to withstand the power. Meng Hao's body shook, and he spit out blood. He looked up into the sky, his eyes narrowing. The face of the Cold Wind sect's Foundation Establishment cultivator twisted, and the approaching patriarchs from the three great sects looked amazed. They stopped flying and immediately clasped hands and bowed toward an old man in a black robe who stood next to the bell in the sky. His robes whipped about in the wind. Behind him, the clouds spun violently. The pupil of his left eye looked like the sun, and shone with brilliant light. The right eye was dark, and its pupil looked like a crescent moon. On his forehead was a strange-looking slit, within which appeared to be another eye. This eye itself was invisible, but emitted a bloody glow. It was Lord Revelation. Chapter 93, Sever the Tao, Change Heaven and Earth, Demonic Will. The instant he saw Lord Revelation, Meng Hao's body grew stiff. In his hands, the nascent soul of Lord Revelation's clone burned in the demonic lamp. Lord Revelation's shout shook the earth for millions of kilometers in all directions. Mountains trembled and the sky filled with dark, roiling clouds. Meng Hao's heart quivered and blood seeped out of his mouth. His body was pushed backwards relentlessly. He coughed up an entire mouthful of blood. Everyone in the region of the Reliance sect, including the pseudo-nascent soul patriarchs and the Foundation Establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect, were as frightened as cicadas in cold weather. They didn't dare to make even the slightest sound. They stared up into the sky, astonished, their eyes filled with dread. And yet, despite the quaking of the earth, the area around Patriarch Reliance's secluded meditation zone was completely quiet. Not a sound could be heard from Patriarch Reliance. Lord Revelation hovered in the air next to his bell. His eyes shone with the splendor of the sun and moon. The darkness and light seemed to interlock and then combine with the crimson bloody glow which emanated from the slit on his forehead. He lifted his right hand up, and then waved it downward. As he did, the dark glow, the bright light and the bloody essence combined to form the image of a hand. It began to descend toward the earth. It takes some time to describe, but happened in an instant. A roar filled the air as the hand fell downward toward the east mountain of the Reliance sect. As the hand descended onto the east mountain, it began to crumble, layer after layer crashing down and disintegrating into dust. By the time the hand had finished its descent, the east mountain was gone. The earth shook, and a fierce wind kicked up. After destroying the east mountain, the hand didn't stop. It continued to pierce down into the ground, as if Lord Revelation knew exactly where Patriarch Reliance's secluded meditation chamber was located. A boom resonated outward, filling nearly half of the state of Jiao. The earth rippled outwards. It seemed that the hand had pierced down and actually destroyed Patriarch Reliance's secluded meditation zone. After the hand finally disappeared, the onlookers saw a massive hole. Within it were numerous incomplete restrictive spells. The place really was Patriarch Reliance's secluded meditation zone. Stone steles and altars lay about in ruins. The massive image of Patriarch Reliance's face was shattered into pieces, and the secluded meditation chamber had been knocked open. But Patriarch Reliance was nowhere to be seen. Patriarch Reliance, get the hell out here. When Lord Revelation saw that Patriarch Reliance was not in the meditation chamber, he raised his head to the sky and let out a roar. The roar vibrated the heavens, rippling outward until it filled the entire state of Jiao. You get the hell out here. Get the hell out here. Get the hell out. Get the hell. Innumerable echoes could be heard, swirling together to form a mighty sound of incomprehensible might. Meng Hao's body trembled as he looked out at the scene. In the place where the East Mountain had once stood, was a giant hole. Patriarch Reliance had been there just a few hours ago, but now he wasn't. Where is he? Thought Meng Hao, his face growing pale. At the moment, he literally couldn't move. The power of Lord Revelation's voice suppressed everything. Anyone whose cultivation base was lower than Lord Revelation's could do nothing more than struggle to stand up against it. The power seemed to contain elements of the heavens, as if Lord Revelation's will controlled everything. This is not nascent soul stage, this is spirit severing stage. It's definitely spirit severing, otherwise this will could not be present. The three pseudo-nascent core patriarchs of the three great sects appeared even more shocked. Patriarch Reliance, you won't show your face? I'll destroy your only inner sect disciple and wipe out the bloodline of your sect forever. I'll level all of these mountains and melt the entire state of Jiao until you appear. He had already swept the state of Jiao with his spiritual sense, but no matter how he searched, he couldn't find Patriarch Reliance. And yet on his way here, he had clearly divined that Patriarch Reliance was within the state of Jiao. A cold look glowed in Lord Revelation's eyes. This was his true self, here to battle with Patriarch Reliance. And yet, Patriarch Reliance was hiding. Powerful killing intent emanated from Lord Revelation. There was a wealth of methods he could use to force Patriarch Reliance to show himself, including killing his inner sect disciple and leveling the mountains. If exterminating the state of Jiao didn't draw him out, he could literally melt the entire nation. Lord Revelation had long since caught sight of the oil lamp in Meng Hao's hands. He looked down, his gaze sweeping the land once again. He lifted his hand, then waved it downward a second time. This time light poured from his eyes, and the slit on his forehead opened up to the width of a finger. The blood-red light poured out, and as his hand descended, the mountains for tens of thousands of miles in all directions began to rock and sway. In the sky above the quaking mountains, appeared an enormous hand. At first it didn't seem very large, but amidst thunderous rumblings, it grew larger and larger, until it seemed as if it covered the mountains for tens of thousands of kilometers in all directions. The earth trembled, and the faces of the three pseudo-nascent soul patriarchs were filled with shock. They fled at the fastest speed they could muster. The Foundation Establishment cultivator from the Cold Wind sect looked pale. He bit the tip of his tongue, sacrificing some of his cultivation base as he transforming into a prismatic beam of light and fled off into the distance. As for Meng Hao, his cultivation base was the weakest. He couldn't even move. The oil lamp flew out of his hands, racing toward the giant palm. The cross-legged nascent soul inside opened its eyes, and then radiated a glow similar to that emitted by Lord Revelation. Meng Hao could only watch wide-eyed as the hand in the sky grew bigger and bigger. It covered everything, until it was the only thing visible in the entire sky. Everything for tens of thousands of kilometers grew black. The hand covered everything. And then, it began to descend. The earth began to quake. Mountains buckled and collapsed. As the hand fell toward him, Meng Hao felt as if doomsday had arrived. A bitter look appeared on his face as he stood there silently. There was no fear or dread in his eyes. He let out a soft sigh. Is everything going to end? I can't accept it. Stubbornness filled his eyes, a flicker which turned into a roaring flame. In the cultivation world, the weak are the prey of the strong. The cultivation base is everything. Only by becoming powerful can you continue on living. Only by increasing your strength can you prevent yourself from being crushed beneath the feet of others. Only then can you stand high in the sky. Meng Hao suddenly smiled. His smile was filled with deep understanding. His will carried the deep desire to become powerful. Now, in the face of such imminent danger, he truly understood himself. The sages said, learning is the most important thing in the life. But in the cultivation world, only the powerful can remain undefeated. Meng Hao stared up at the descending hand. He would watch as it landed onto his body, crushing him into the ground. He would not close his eyes. He would watch everything. He would imprint this vision onto his spirit. When he was reincarnated, it would still be there. If there really was a next life, he would become powerful and invincible then. As the hand continued to plummet, the mountains around him crumbled. Everything started to grow blurry, and blackness filled Meng Hao's eyes. It was as if at this moment, heaven and earth viewed him as nothing more than a bug. He didn't struggle in the least bit. If there is an afterlife, I will never allow something like this to happen again. Amidst the deafening roaring, Meng Hao stood there, trembling. Blood seeped out of his orifices, and his bones made cracking sounds. Within moments, he would be reduced to nothing more than a pool of blood. It was at this moment that, all of a sudden, a dark red light appeared. Glowing brightly, it shot toward the hand at high speed, speeding out from a location far away from Meng Hao's vision. The blood-red glow seemed to be formed from the dregs of blood refined over innumerable years. A powerful demonic aura poured out, filling the heavens. The demonic aura was so thick that it seemed to be able to change the color of heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, everything turned the color of blood. The bloody glow approached, speeding toward the massive hand that Lord Revelation had summoned. And then it severed it. The severing sent a bloody glow high into the heavens. This severing was powerful enough to rend all creation. This severing seemed strong enough to split heaven and earth into two. And even if it wasn't actually that powerful, it had the will to attempt to sever the Tao, change heaven and earth. Demonic will. This person was not Patriarch Reliance. This chapter was sponsored by Joseph Halbauti. Chapter 94. You really want me to come out? An incredible roaring boom sounded out from the massive hand as the glowing red beam sliced through it. Starting in the space between the middle and ring finger of the hand, a massive gash appeared, cutting it completely in half. One slash, and the hand was severed. You! Cried Lord Revelation. His face flickered, and he lifted his head, his eyes flashing. A thunderous boom rolled across the land. The giant hand, tens of thousands of kilometers wide, had moments ago blotted out Meng Hao's vision, covering the entire land. But in the blink of an eye, a gap appeared, and Meng Hao could suddenly see the sky. The hand split apart into two halves, each of which slammed into the ground on either side of Meng Hao. The ground trembled and began to sink down. The mountains were crushed. All the wild creatures in the area, unable to flee, were instantly transformed to ash. The Cold Wind Sect Foundation establishment cultivator, despite having spared no effort in his attempt to flee, could not possibly escape in such a short time. He was smashed to death into the ground. The cultivation bases of the three pseudo-nascent soul patriarchs were anything but ordinary. Furthermore, Lord Revelation was not targeting them with his attack. They also sacrificed elements of their cultivation bases to flee. Coughing up 7 or 8 mouthfuls of blood each, they just managed to reach the edge of the giant hand. Behind them, the earth seemed to have turned into a violently churning sea. As the hand disappeared, they mutely looked back at the scene. Previously, the Reliance sect had been surrounded by endless mountain chains. As of now, the only thing that remained was a massive recess in the ground. Its shape was that of a giant hand. However, the handprint was not complete. Splitting it down the middle was a jagged section of earth jutting up into the sky like a mountain. On top of the mountain stood Meng Hao. Beneath him was a stretch of earth about 300 meters wide. It created a jagged path, on either side of which was a massive hole that sunk down deep into the earth. Originally, this mountain should not have been here, but there it was, the only thing left. A strange expression filled Meng Hao's eyes as he looked up into the sky. He didn't know who had saved him, and he didn't stop to think about it. Immediately, a flying sword appeared under his feet, and he sped off into the distance, his body turning into a multicolored beam of light as he shot toward the edge of the massive handprint. I never thought the illustrious demon lord of the southern domain would show up in the tiny state of Jiao. Lord Revelation's face was dark as he flicked his sleeve. His voice echoed out like thunder in all directions. But you're only a clone. Your true self is suppressed and incapable of coming here to stop me from exterminating Patriarch Reliance. There was no response. It was almost as if the blood-red severing glow hadn't appeared at all. Patriarch Reliance, get the hell out here. Get the hell out here. Get the hell out here. As his voice boomed out, Lord Revelation lifted his right hand and slapped the revelation bell. Its booming filled the sky, echoing out across the land, sweeping Lord Revelation's voice along with it. Countless tall mountains throughout the state of Jiao began to crack and crumble as a voice filled with profound ancientness filled the air. It was impossible to tell where the voice came from, but it filled the entire nation. You really want me to come out? As soon as he heard the voice, Meng Hao's eyes narrowed. It was Patriarch Reliance's voice. And yet, something about it sounded different. It seemed less unreasonable and more dignified. More ancient. So, you finally speak, said Lord Revelation, his eyes glittering. Patriarch Reliance, quit hiding. We have a score to settle from 1,000 years ago. Even if you succeeded in your spirit severing, you should not have dared to take my clone's nascent soul. Today, we battle, and in the end, I will remain, and you will not. He flicked the revelation bell, and it sounded out with a boom and began to emit a blinding light. The light enveloped Lord Revelation, and he began to glow brightly. As for this battle, it must be won. He had already determined Patriarch Reliance's true level. Lord Revelation had already completed the second spirit severing, and with that power, he could exterminate Patriarch Reliance. As for this battle, he had complete confidence. He had thrown caution to the wind and come here as his true self. A demon lord had appeared and used a bit of remarkable magic, but that didn't scare him in the least. As for this battle, there was not the slightest chance he could lose. He had brought the revelation bell, which had absorbed countless prayers and sacrifices from the state of revelation. It was sentient already, his most valuable treasure. With this bell, even if he faced someone of the third severing, he would still be able to achieve victory. In addition to this, the Dawn Immortal had gifted him with a portion of his spiritual sense. Everything was quiet for a long moment. Then, Patriarch Reliance's voice could be heard again, filled with profound ancientness. Back then, I only cared about the Milky Way Sea. The voice was filled with a strange tone. It echoed out, seemingly filled with the ability to last through the ages. It echoed out across the entirety of the state of Jiao. The land began to quake. This quaking filled the entire state of Jiao. Even the mortals could feel it. Meng Hao ducked his head and shot forward even faster. I don't know how many years passed, nor how many times I slumbered and awoke. Finally, a day arrived in which I woke up to find myself facing a through-and-through bastard who should have died 1,000, no, 10,000 deaths. From his tone of voice, he seemed to be getting upset. The last few words were spoken as if through clenched teeth. As he spoke, the trembling across the state of Jiao grew more intense. Mountains and boulders trembled, tall buildings rocked back and forth. Within the three great sects, the remaining cultivators looked around in shock. The situation was the same in Milky Way City. Meng Hao's mind spun. He was wondering which bastard Patriarch Reliance was referring to. That damned bastard couldn't possibly defeat me. He brought a bunch of other bastards with him, and we fought back and forth for years. In the end, they deceived me. They made a lot of promises to me, convinced me to leave the Milky Way Sea and come to the southern domain. Patriarch Reliance seemed to be growing angrier and angrier. As he spoke, the land of the state of Jiao shook even harder. In the northern part of the nation, a thunderous roar sounded up into the heavens. A massive crack appeared in the land, millions of miles long, and growing longer. If you could stand far up in the sky and look down, you would be able to see that this massive crack was not a straight line, but a curving arc. When I got to the southern domain, the bastards tricked me. They fed me a bunch of random things that ended up placing me underneath an invisible seal. They promised me that a few years later, they would give me some kind of special blessing of good fortune. But later, the damned bastards all died or disappeared. Finally, there was only the original one left. When I was asleep, he sneaked off to another planet. He left me with a demon sealing jade, which I was supposed to give to a successor. In reality, those bastards were just afraid of heavenly tribulation and wanted to use me to fight against it. Patriarch Reliance seemed to be gnashing his teeth. The sound reverberated across the land. A huge crack appeared in the eastern region of the state of Jiao, accompanied by a thunderous roar. The shape of the crack was a massive semicircle. Seeing all of this happen, Lord Revelation's face changed. He appeared to be growing a bit apprehensive. Meng Hao took in a breath, thinking of the demon sealing jade that he had. The bastards didn't keep their promise. They tricked me. I was enraged, and even though I slumbered, I still managed to squeeze out a bit of spiritual will. It was weak and constrained by the laws of the Tao of the heavens, so it was incarnated into the body of a mortal. It started from scratch, practicing cultivation. Because they tricked me, I decided to sever their legacy. I changed the name of the demon sealing sect to the Reliance sect. From then on, my spiritual will call itself Patriarch Reliance. As his voice boomed out, Meng Hao's eyes suddenly grew wide. He looked back at the land of the state of Jiao behind him. It seethed like an ocean, under the echoes of Patriarch Reliance's words. When Lord Revelation heard the words, his expression changed to one of shock. Without even thinking about it, he began to move backwards. Another crashing boom rolled out across the state of Jiao, and a massive crack appeared in the south. At the same time, in the east, a fourth arcing crack appeared, accompanied by a thunderous bang. The four massive cracks split out to meet each other, surrounding the entire state of Jiao in a massive circle. The entirety of the state of Jiao was contained in this enormous circle which suddenly began to rise into the air. Black soil was revealed, and a fierce gale wind blew in all directions. Massive amounts of soil crumbled off the edges. As it rose up, the land quaked and clouds roiled in the sky. Lord Revelation's face was pale, his eyes filled with shock. The ground rumbled as it rose higher and higher into the air. 3,000 meters, 15,000, 30,000. It rose so high that it was impossible to describe. The land rose up, and Meng Hao was still on it. He felt as if he were approaching the heavens. The land contained the cities of the mortals, the three great sects, Milky Way City, and countless lives. The entire state of Jiao was being lifted up, rising away from the earth, away from the southern domain. Beneath it was a massive, enormous hole in the ground. The hole was, of course, the same size as the entire state of Jiao. Standing above the hole was a vicious-looking turtle, as large as the entire state of Jiao, its body covered with countless black spikes. It looked just like the mythical Xian Wu black turtle. Earth covered the turtle's massive shell, as if the shell were being held in place by the land. The earth was none other than the state of Jiao. A colossal head slowly emerged from the turtle's shell. The head was roughly 1/10 the size of the entire state of Jiao. Its skin was black, and covered with creases. Earth crumbled off from the head as it raised up. Its massive eyes turned to look down on Lord Revelation, who stood there panting, as tiny as an insect, his face pale, his body quivering, a look of disbelief on his face. "You called me out. Shall we fight?" Chapter 95. A rain shower, a cold spell. Meng Hao stared dumbly, his mind reeling. All the fantastic and bizarre things he had seen in his life couldn't compare to the shocking sight in front of him. His mind was blank, as if he had lost his ability to even think. He could only stand there and look numbly. Patriarch Reliance was actually a mind-bogglingly enormous black turtle. And the state of Jiao existed on the earth upon his back. He himself had lived on Patriarch Reliance's back for these 20 years. No wonder he was called Patriarch Reliance. He was relied upon not just by a single person, but by an entire nation. Cultivators and mortals alike relied on him. After Patriarch Reliance had been sealed, he began to slumber. Yet he still managed to force out a tiny bit of his will, which then attempted to destroy the legacy of the demon sealing sect. Now it made sense why the Reliance sect had formerly been called the Demon Sealing sect, although few people even knew that nowadays. And no wonder the Reliance sect was called an evil sect and had such brutal, internecine struggles. The body containing the sliver of his will practice cultivation until reaching the spirit severing stage, but as for his actual body, how powerful was it, exactly? There were still many things Meng Hao didn't understand. For example, if Patriarch Reliance was so powerful, why hadn't he been able to save himself from the very beginning? If Meng Hao hadn't appeared, would he have died? Considering how powerful his actual body was, why did he need to absorb the power of those cultivators? Lifted up along with the land containing the state of Jiao, the three pseudo-nascent soul cultivators stared in shock as all of this happened. Their minds spun and expressions of astonishment covered their faces. They were even incapable of feeling fear. They could only stare blankly. They could scarcely even believe what they saw. Lord Revelation was also struck speechless as he looked up at the massive head. It was immeasurably larger than he himself. In fact, it was so large that you couldn't even see from one end of it to another. Fear began to shine out from his eyes. How could he possibly have imagined that the Patriarch Reliance he had cursed and challenged to fight would be like this? As Patriarch Reliance's voice echoed out, his words stabbed into Lord Revelation's ears, causing his body to tremble and his scalp to go numb. He was sapped of any and all will to fight. Patriarch Reliance didn't need to strike out. Now that he had truly appeared, he casually exuded a bit of pressure onto Lord Revelation, causing his body to tremble. Lord Revelation's blood seemed as if it would stop flowing. The Tao enlightenment he had acquired with his spirit severing collapsed. He was as weak as a bug. Patriarch Reliance could crush him with a single breath. The terrifying pressure exuded by the head caused Lord Revelation's mouth to go dry. Despite his extraordinary cultivation base, cold sweat broke out across his body. The Revelation bell next to him didn't give him the slightest sense of comfort. Even the spiritual sense imparted by the Dawn Immortal didn't give him the slightest sense of safety. Now he understood why Patriarch Reliance hadn't paid the slightest bit attention when he mentioned the Dawn Immortal. Of course he wouldn't, considering his extraordinary actual body. And now he knew why Patriarch Reliance didn't fear the Dawn Immortal. Even more astonishing was that in his recollection, according to all of the ancient texts he had studied, the state of Jiao had existed for a very, very long time. This made him even more frightened. Which had existed first? Patriarch Reliance, or the state of Jiao? If it were the latter, that would be easier to accept. If it were the former. Thinking of this, Lord Revelation began to tremble so violently he felt as if his skin might explode. Well, shall we fight? The words echoed out Patriarch Reliance, each one of them rumbling like thunder. The thunderous booming caused Lord Revelation to be hurled backwards several thousand meters. Blood showered from his mouth. The bell seemed completely ordinary now. It was covered with vast amounts of cracks and fractures. No, there's no need to fight, said Lord Revelation hastily, his face pale. Just now, I of the junior generation was simply joking. Patriarch. Sir, please don't take offense. Patriarch Reliance's two enormous eyes stared directly at him, and he trembled. Without your two palm strikes, I wouldn't have been able to come out. Those damned bastards sealed me many years ago. The seal has been growing weaker recently. But to break through it, I needed to recover my cultivation base a bit more. But then in the midst of it all, someone released the power of the spirit severing stage. That knocked the seal even looser, and finally I was able to break out. His voice boomed out in all directions. When Meng Hao heard the words, his body trembled. Originally, I planned to use my sliver of will to break the seal. But mortal cultivation, and I don't quite agree. Even with my knowledge of the sublime spirit scripture, I couldn't break through to the next level of spirit severing. Just when I was about to make the final breakthrough, I got cheated by a hateful little bastard. Damn it, everyone from the demon sealing sect is a bastard. Stealing the spiritual energy I needed to break the seal, robbing me of my demonic lamp. He let out a roar. Meng Hao wanted to flee. He knew exactly who Patriarch Reliance was talking about. You did well, very well. Luckily you attacked, helping break my seal. I need to repay you. Hearing Patriarch Reliance's words, Lord Revelation gaped in shock. Then his expression changed to one of wild joy. How could he have imagined that he would score a lucky break? He had gotten lucky after all. Even as he clasped his hands in respect, Patriarch Reliance opened his mouth, and with blinding speed, snapped him up. Lord Revelation and his revelation bell were swallowed down in an instant. Crunching sounds emanated from Patriarch Reliance's mouth, but no blood-curdling scream. When Meng Hao saw this, he began to breathe harder. He was all too familiar with Patriarch Reliance's unreasonableness. He unconsciously retreated backward. Suddenly, Patriarch Reliance's head swung around to face Meng Hao. It came to stop several hundred meters in front of him, staring at him. Meng Hao squeezed out a smile. He didn't necessarily believe everything that Patriarch Reliance had said to Lord Revelation, but neither did he disbelieve. From his experience, most of what the Patriarch said wasn't true. Congratulations on emerging from seclusion, Patriarch. Your might is all-encompassing. Now that you know the truth, are you frightened? Patriarch Reliance's voice rolled out like thunder, and he glared at Meng Hao. The sound of his voice was so loud it was almost deafening. He coughed up some blood. You demon-sealing sect people are all bastards, said Patriarch Reliance slowly, staring at Meng Hao. Those old bastards were like this, and you're the same, kid. You all cheated me. Oh well, forget it. You're a member of the Reliance sect, after all. Allow me to bless you with, as Patriarch Reliance spoke, Meng Hao's scalp began to grow numb. He thought of what had just happened with Lord Revelation, and his mind began to race as he tried to think of what to do. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration hit him as he remembered something. He remembered what the young girl guiding Trirane had said to him at the North Sea. Big brother, its aura is beneath your feet. Don't provoke it. Remember, the great path of demon sealing, a concept like a scripture. At that time, Meng Hao hadn't understood her words, but all of a sudden, now he did. The it beneath his feet was none other than Patriarch Reliance. Don't provoke it. Remember, the great path of demon sealing, a concept like a scripture. The great path of demon sealing, a concept like a scripture. Don't provoke it. Meng Hao's mind flashed like lightning. Even as this happened, Patriarch Reliance finished speaking. Bless you with some good fortune. I need to repay you. The instant he finished speaking, Meng Hao lifted his hand and slapped his bag of holding. Instantly, the demon sealing jade appeared in his hand. When it appeared, a strong wind buffeted his face. The wind faded, and when it did, Patriarch Reliance's head was less than 9 meters away from him. The ends of the colossal head couldn't even be seen. The only thing Meng Hao could see was black skin and a massive eye the size of a huge city. The eye seemed to be struggling. Ancient Tao, said Meng Hao hurriedly, reciting the first line from the demon sealing jade. Tenacious desire to seal the heavens, benefaction for all in the mountains. Tao tribulation must come to the 9 mountains and seas. My fate is the Aeon. As the words left Meng Hao's mouth, Patriarch Reliance lifted his colossal head up and let out a massive roar. As it billowed out, ripples appeared in the air to accompany it. A 9-sided mystical symbol suddenly appeared on Patriarch Reliance's forehead. It appeared to be ancient and archaic, and deeply embedded into his forehead. It flickered, and his body shook. Stop! Damned demon sealing scripture and damned demon sealing sect. A ferocious expression appeared on his face and he let out another heaven-shaking roar, then stared at Meng Hao. Meng Hao's heart pounded as he looked back at Patriarch Reliance. Those bastards were too malignant, thought Patriarch Reliance. The seal is broken, but the sealing mark is still branded onto my spirit, forcing me to be the Tao protector of the 9th demon sealer. This cannot be. The demon sealing sect has committed crimes against the heavens, and was plagued by misfortune. They understood that the number 9 is a preeminent, sacred number according to the Tao of the heavens. They knew that the greatest opposition from the heavens would come upon the 9th demon sealer. Therefore, they took precautions. They wanted me to be the Tao protector for the 9th demon sealer. But this trifling kid is of the chi condensation stage. How could he possibly act as my master? Those damned bastards. I changed the name from Demon Sealing Sect to Reliance Sect and created rules to pit all the disciples against each other, all in the hopes of preventing someone like Meng Hao from appearing. A mist began to seep out from the North Sea, which of course was part of the lands of the state of Zhao that rested on Patriarch Reliance's back. Within the mist, a boat magically appeared. An old man and a young girl stood at the prow of the boat, looking up at Patriarch Reliance. They clasped hands and bowed to him with utmost respect. "Guiding Trirane pays respects to Patriarch," said the young girl. Her voice, clear and melodious, echoed out with a light and spiritual tone. "Ah, you're the sentient rain that fell in the 3rd month of the Yiding year of the ancient Gu calendar. You fell onto my back, and became a lake." The young girl smiled and nodded. Then she looked toward Meng Hao and winked. Meng Hao took a deep breath. Now he finally understood the meaning of the girl's strange name. Patriarch Reliance let out a cold snort. He looked at the little girl and then stared off into the sky. Meng Hao followed his gaze and caught sight of what appeared to be an indistinct blood-colored figure. The figure clasped hands and bowed in respect to Patriarch Reliance, then disappeared. Patriarch Reliance lowered his head once more and looked at Meng Hao. "Very well, Meng Hao. In the future, keep your distance from me." He blew a breath out of his mouth, causing Meng Hao to fly up into the air. Buffeted by a glowing black wind, Meng Hao was tossed out of the state of Zhao to land on the edge of the massive hole in the earth. Son of a bitch. I can't even look at him. In my life, I'll never recognize him as my master. I'm out of here. The further away the better. He'll never find me. As for the treasures of mine that he took, fine, consider them payment. All of our debts are settled. In this way, my heart can rest at ease and I can continue to practice cultivation. His eyes flickered, and then his body turned. Meng Hao watched as the colossal turtle, carrying the state of Zhao on his back, transformed into a massive beam of prismatic light, and then disappeared over the horizon. He appeared to be heading in the direction of the Milky Way Sea. Perhaps this was why legends arose of an island of immortals. If one searched for it, it could never be found. But when it appeared, anyone who stepped foot on it would find that it was a nation inhabited by mortals. It was, of course, the state of Zhao. Some time passed, and eventually the skies grew calm once again. Meng Hao stood there looking down at the deep, gaping hole. Then he looked off silently in the direction in which Patriarch Reliance had disappeared. Time passed, and rain began to fall. It fell with urgency, slowly flowing down into the massive pit left by the state of Zhao. Many years later, this area would turn into a sea. Standing amidst the sheets of falling rain, Meng Hao let out a long sigh. Images from the past several days flashed through his mind. It all seemed virtually inconceivable. Thinking upon it all, it seemed a dreamlike fantasy. The state of Zhao was gone. Meng Hao looked around at the rain, then up into the hazy sky. He contemplated his life during the past 4 years. "I started out as a scholar," he murmured. "My life is like snow. I can only exist in winter. I can yearn for the summer of the mortal world, but that is not my life anymore." After a long time passed, he turned. Surrounded by the falling rain, he once again began to trod a road which led away from his roots. He struck a lonely figure amidst the rain. Eventually, he seemed to merge into it. Even if a hot wind blew over him, it would do nothing to disperse him. Because this was his life. Life is comprised of one experience after another. Or, you could say that life is comprised of many experiences. Different experiences lead to different lives. If you experience a cold, bitter wind, you will become snow. If you experience scorching heat, you will become rain. Whatever you experience in life will shape the person you are. That is what makes life wonderful. Southern Domain, here I come. Although, before I get there, I must reach Foundation Establishment. As he walked through the rain, he lifted up his head, and his eyes glittered brilliantly. He would never forget the stubborn desire to achieve power that he had experienced underneath the descent of Lord Revelation's palm attack. In this world, only the powerful can be invincible. Wait a minute, where did that blood-colored glow come from? With questions circling in his mind, Meng Hao disappeared into the distance. This chapter was sponsored by Deathblade. This is the end of Book 1.